ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय करुणापूर्णसुदाब्धे कबलितघनविश्वरूपकिरणावल्या अरुणाचलपरमात्मन् अरुणो भवचित्तकञ्जसुविकासाय वन्दे श्रीरमणऋषे आचार्यस्य पदाब्जं यो मे दर्शयधीशं भान्तं ध्वान्तमतीत्यः अखण्डसच्चिदानन्दे परब्रह्मण्यलौकिके विलसन्तं गुरुं नौमिं सर्वदा हृद्यहं भजे. Day by Day with Bhagavan, episode number 12, 9/3/46 morning. Dr. Masalawala, retired Chief Medical Officer of Bhopal, who has been here for more than a month now and who is now also in temporary charge of the Ashramam Hospital in the absence of Dr. Shiva Rao, put the following questions to Bhagavan and got the following answers. Question. Bhagavan says the influence of the Jnani steals into the devotee in silence. Bhagavan also says contact with great men, exalted souls, is one efficacious means of realizing one's true being. Bhagavan. Yes, what is the contradiction? Jnani, great men, exalted souls, does he? Doctor. Differentiate between these? Thereupon I said no. Bhagavan. Contact with them is good. They will work through silence. By speaking, their power is reduced. Silence is most powerful. Speech is always less powerful than silence. So, mental contact is the best. Question. Does this hold good even after the dissolution of the physical body of the Jnani, or is it true only so long as he is in flesh and blood? Bhagavan. Guru is not the physical form. So the contact will remain even after the physical form of the Guru vanishes. Question. Similarly, does the contact of a devotee with his Guru continue after the passing of the Guru, or does it stop? It is possible that for a ripe soul, his self may act as his Guru even after the going away of the Guru. But what is the unripe soul to do? Bhagavan has said that an outer Guru is also needed to push the mind of the devotee towards the self. Can he come in contact with another adept? Is this contact to be necessarily physical, or will a mental contact do? Which is better? Bhagavan. As already explained, Guru not being physical form, his contact will continue after his form vanishes. If one Jnani exists in the world, his influence will be felt by or benefit all people in the world and not simply his immediate disciples. All the people in the world are divided into his disciples, bhaktas, those who are indifferent to him and those who are even hostile to him, and it is said in the following verse that all these classes will be benefited by the existence of the Jnani. From Vedanta Chudamani. The gist is, 4 classes of people are benefited by Jivan Muktas. By his faith in the Jivan Mukta, the disciple attains mukti. The bhakta or who worships his guru attains merit. The indifferent who have seen the sacred life of the Jivan Mukta acquire desire for righteousness, and even the sinners, that is, the hostile in the first verse, get rid of their sins by the mere fact of their having had darshan of such saints. God, Guru, and the Self are the same. After your bhakti to God has matured you, God comes in the shape of Guru and from outside pushes your mind inside, while being inside as Self, he draws you there from within. Such a Guru is needed generally, though not for very rare and advanced souls. One can go to another Guru after his Guru passes away, but all Gurus are one, as none of them is the form. Always mental contact is the best. Question. My practice has been a continuous japa of the names of God with the incoming breath and the name of Baba, that is Upasani Baba or Sai Baba, with the outgoing breath. Simultaneously with this, I see the form of Baba always. Even in Bhagavan, I see Baba. The external appearances are also much alike. Bhagavan is thin. Baba was a little stout. Now, should I continue this or change the method, as something from within says that if I stick to the name and form, I shall never go above name and form. But I can't understand what further to do after giving up name and form. Will Bhagavan please enlighten me on the point? Bhagavan, you may continue in your present method. When the japa becomes continuous, all other thoughts cease and one is in one's real nature, which is japa or dhyana. We turn our mind outwards on things of the world and are therefore not aware of our real nature, being always japa. When by conscious effort or japa or dhyana, as we call it, we prevent our mind from thinking of other things, then what remains is our real nature, which is japa. So long as you think you are name and form, you can't escape name and form in japa also. When you realize you are not name and form, then name and form will drop off themselves. No other effort is necessary. Japa or dhyana will naturally and as a matter of course lead to it. What is now regarded as the means, japa, will then be found to be the goal. Name and God are not different. See the teaching of Namadev on the significance of God's name, extracted in the September 1937 issue of the Vision. This was read out in the hall. Bhagavan also quoted the Bible. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Question. Is liberation to be achieved before the dissolution of the body, or can it be had after death? What is the meaning of a verse like 2:72 or 8:6 of the Gita? Bhagavan, is there death for you? For whom is death? The body which dies, were you aware of it? Did you have it during sleep? The body was not when you slept, but you existed even then. When you awoke, you got the body, and even in the waking state, you exist. You existed both in sleep and waking. but the body did not exist in sleep and exists only in waking. That which does not exist always, but exists at one time and not at another, cannot be real. You exist always, and you alone are therefore real. Liberation is another name for you. It is always here and now with you. It has not to be won or reached hereafter or somewhere. Christ has said, "The kingdom of God is within you, here and now." You have no death. Thayumanavar has sung, "Chandadamum Veda Oli Jagam Irundalum Maranamundenbadu Sadanishtar Nilaivadillai." That is, even when living in the world, those who are always in Nishtha do not think there is such a thing as death. The Gita verse only means in the context of the whole Gita, chapter 2 for instance, that you must achieve liberation during your lifetime. Even if you fail to do it during your lifetime, you must think of God at least at the time of death, since one becomes what he thinks of at the time of death. But unless all your life you have been thinking of God, unless you have accustomed yourself to dhyana of God always during life, it would not at all be possible for you to think of God at the time of death. 14/3/1946. I was away at Vellore from 11th afternoon to 13th night. During my absence, one Mr. Shankaradev from Dhulia was here and has left. He has been writing the life of Samartha Ramdas in Marathi, and one part of it has also been published. It seems there was one Ananta Mauni, a disciple of Ramdas, who is believed to have belonged originally to this place and to have gone with Ramdas in his South Indian tour. So the biographer was trying to gather all available information about this Ananta Mauni. Bhagavan was not able to give any information, and so advised the visitor to go into the town with guides from the ashramam and try to gather information. This morning, Mr. Manikkam, disciple of Shivaprakasham Pillai, arrived, bringing from Mr. S. Pillai 2 notebooks containing full notes on reality in 40 verses in Tamil, supplement not included, and the general meaning alone for Bhagavan's Devi Kalottaram and Atma Sakshatkaram. 15/3/46. A visitor from Pune who has been here for the last 2 or 3 days asked some questions, and Bhagavan told him, "Mukti or liberation is our nature. It is another name for us. Our wanting mukti is a very funny thing. It is like a man who is in the shade, voluntarily leaving the shade, going into the sun, feeling the severity of the heat there, making great efforts to get back into the shade, and then rejoicing, 'How sweet is the shade! I have after all reached the shade.' We all are doing exactly the same. We are not different from the reality. We imagine we are different. That is, we create the Bheda Bhava, the feeling of difference, and then undergo great sadhana to get rid of the Bheda Bhava and realize the oneness. Why imagine or create Bheda Bhava and then destroy it? Afternoon. Dr. Masalawala placed in Bhagavan's hands a letter he had received from his friend V. K. Ajgankar, a gentleman of about 35, a follower of Jnaneswar Maharaj, who is said to have attained Jnana in his 28th year. The letter said, "You call me Purna. Who is not Purna in this world?" Bhagavan agreed and continued in the vein in which he discoursed this morning and said, "We limit ourselves first, then seek to become the unlimited that we always are. All effort is only for giving up the notion that we are limited." The letter further said, "The first verse in the Isavasyopanishad says the world is Purna. It simply cannot be anything else, as its very existence is built on the Purna." Bhagavan approved of this also and said, "There is this typed letter, for instance. To see the world alone and not the Purna or self would be something like saying, 'I see the letters but not the paper,' while it is the existence of the paper that makes the existence of the letters possible." Dr. M said, "In the letter we see the paper, but we are able to see only the world and we don't see God." Bhagavan replied, "What happens in sleep? Where did the world go then? Then you alone or the self alone existed." The letter also said, "Jnaneswar Maharaj has said God will never forsake his bhakta who has undivided love for him." Bhagavan said, "Every saint, every book says so. I have been reading Ram Das's writings. Here too, so many verses end, 'Ramachandra will never forsake his bhakta.'" So saying, Bhagavan read out a few of those verses. The letter went on to say, Ramana Maharshi is an exponent of Ajata doctrine of Advaita Vedanta. Of course, it is a bit difficult. Bhagavan remarked on this, "Somebody has told him so. I do not teach only the Ajata doctrine. I approve of all schools. The same truth has to be expressed in different ways to suit the capacity of the hearer. The Ajata doctrine says nothing exists except the one reality. There is no birth or death, no projection or drawing in, no sadhaka, no mumukshu, no mukta, no bondage, no liberation. The one unity alone exists ever. To such as find it difficult to grasp this truth and who ask, how can we ignore this solid world we see all around us? The dream experience is pointed out and they are told, all that you see depends on the seer. Apart from the seer, there is no seen. This is called the Drishti Srishti Vada, or the argument that one first creates out of his mind and then sees what his mind itself has created. To such as cannot grasp even this and who further argue the dream experience is so short while the world always exists. The dream experience was limited to me, but the world is felt and seen not only by me but by so many, and we cannot call such a world non-existent. The argument called Srishti Drishtivada is addressed and they are told, God first created such and such a thing out of such and such an element and then something else and so forth. That alone will satisfy this class. Their mind is otherwise not satisfied and they ask themselves, how can all geography, all maps, all sciences, stars, planets, and the rules governing or relating to them and all knowledge be totally untrue? To such it is best to say, yes, God created all this and so you see it. Dr. M said, "But all this cannot be true. Only one doctrine can be true." Bhagavan said, "All these are only to suit the capacity of the learner. The absolute can only be one." The letter further said, "Avyabhicharini bhakti is the only necessary thing." As Dr. M did not understand what Avyabhicharini bhakti meant, Bhagavan explained that it only meant bhakti to God without any other thought occupying the mind. Bhagavan said, this word, Ananya Bhakti, Ekagrita Bhakti, all mean the same. The letter continued, in the mind, two things do not exist at the same time, either God or samsara. Samsara is already there. That is to be reduced little by little, and God is to be entered in its stead. Bhagavan remarked on this, God is there already, not samsara. Only you do not see it on account of the samsara rubbish you have filled your mind with. Remove the rubbish and you will see God. If a room is filled with various articles, the space in the room has not vanished anywhere. To have space, we have not to create it, but only to remove the articles stocked in the room. Even so, God is there. If you turn the mind inward instead of outward on things, then you see the mind merges in the one unity which alone exists. Bhagavan also agreed with the writer when he said that to see God, Guru's grace is necessary, for which again God's anugraha is necessary, which in turn could be had only by upasana. The letter conveyed the writer's namaskar to Bhagavan. Thereupon Bhagavan said, the mind merging in its source, the one unity, is the only true namaskar. 16.3.46 Ceylon Ramachandra sent me the 5 songs recently composed by him in Tamil on Bhagavan and his grace towards him in saving him this time through all his serious illness, and sent word that I should read them before Bhagavan. So at about 10:30 a.m. I read out all the 5 songs, putting myself in R's place and trying to render the songs with their full bhava. The previous day, 2 of the songs alone were ready and had been shown to Bhagavan by Mrs. R. Mr. Viswanath had already written them out in the Stotra book. Bhagavan made a few corrections and divided the feet cheer properly, with the sandhi properly joined and not split as R had written. In the evening, Mr. V wrote down in the remaining 3 verses also in the book of Stotras kept in the hall. 17.3.46 Afternoon. Looking at the outgoing mail, Bhagavan remarked, Eknath's mother has passed away. Do you know? Mr. R. Narayana Iyer replied, yes, I saw in the mail an announcement to that effect. Bhagavan then remarked, she and her husband, the late Dr. Nanjunda Rao, came to me even when I was in Virupaksha cave. After that too, they came once or twice. The last time they came here with one Chakkarai Ammal, a lady who had learned something and had a following of her own, and whom the doctor also regarded as a sort of guru. They were, I think, returning from a pilgrimage to Benares and other places. 18.3.47 46. One Mr. Giridhari Lal, an old resident of Aurobindo's ashram, came here last evening and is staying at the ashramam. He asked Bhagavan this morning, "It is said in the Puranas that the Kali Yuga consists of so many thousands of years, and that so much of it has passed, and that so much yet remains, etc. May I know when this Yuga is to end?" Bhagavan, I don't consider time real, so I take no interest in such matters. We know nothing about the past or the yugas which were in the past, nor do we know about the future. But we know the present exists. Let us know about it first. Then all other doubts will cease. After a pause, he added, Time and space always change, but there is something which is eternal and changeless. For example, the world and time, past or future, nothing exists for us during sleep, but we exist. Let us try to find out that which is changeless and which always exists. How will it benefit us to know that the Kali Yuga started in such and such a year and that it would end so many years after now? Giridhari Lal, I know from the standpoint of one whose level of consciousness is beyond time and space, such questions are useless. But to us struggling souls, it may be important in this way. It is said that in the previous yugas, example Satya Yuga, man had not fallen to the low level in which he now is in this Kali Yuga, and that it was much easier for him then to attain liberation than now. Bhagavan, on the other hand, it is said it is much easier to secure salvation in this Yuga than in the Satya Yuga. Some days or hours of penance in this Yuga would secure what several years of penance alone could have secured in those yugas. That is what the books say. Further, there is nothing to attain and no time within which to attain. You are always that. You have not got to attain anything. You have only to give up thinking you are limited. To give up thinking you are this upadhi or body. Giridhari Lal, then why do these Puranas give the exact duration of each yuga in so many years? Bhagavan, there might be an allegorical meaning in the number of years mentioned for each yuga, or the immensity of the periods of time assigned to each yuga may be a mere device to draw man's attention to the fact that though he should live up to his full span of 100 years, his life would be such a trifling, insignificant fraction in the entire life of the universe, and that he should therefore take a proper view of his own humble place in the entire scheme and not go about with a swollen head, deeming himself as of great importance. Instead of saying, what is man's life compared to eternity, they have taught him to consider how short his span is. Further, it is said there is a regular cycle of such yugas, and who knows how many such cycles have come and gone. Again, each yuga is subdivided into 4 yugas. There is no end to all such calculations, and different schools have their theory as to when the present Kali Yuga is to end. When time itself does not exist, as for instance in sleep, what is the use of bothering oneself with all such questions? 23:46 morning. After I left the dining hall about 11:15 a.m., Bhagavan sent for me there. I was surprised because it is very unusual for him to send for me. When I went, he told me, "Poor Mr. Veerabhadraya, he was once deputy collector at Chittur and was last at Bellary, is no more. When the letter was shown to me this morning, I looked for you in the hall to tell you, but you were not there. The son has written. It seems there was a minor operation. We don't know what it was." Again in the afternoon, Bhagavan asked me if I was not writing to Mr. V's son. I replied, "The son may not even remember me. They may not expect any letter from me." I was just then reading Dialogues from the Upanishads by Swami Sivananda Saraswati, and almost the first story there is that of Nachiketas. So I reminded Bhagavan that soon after Mr. V came to Bhagavan for the first time from Chittur, he wrote an article comparing Bhagavan to Nachiketas. He had a notion that Bhagavan was an incarnation of Nachiketas. Bhagavan said, "Yes, I remember the article." He wrote one or two more articles also besides that one. Evening. Some gentlemen came and recited Samaveda before Bhagavan. It was very pleasant and moving to hear. 21:3:46 Morning. Balaram came across a Sanskrit poem in which the hill called Anai Malai, Elephant Hill, near Madura is mentioned. He mentioned it to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan said, "Yes, there is such a hill near Madura. From a distance, it looks like a big elephant lying down." The word Anai Malai reminded Bhagavan of the first stanza in Tirujnana Sambandhar's songs, in which Anai Malai is referred to, and Bhagavan quoted the song. It becomes Manin Nervili, and Bhagavan explained, "The Madura king Pandyan was inclined towards Jainism. His wife was the daughter of the Chola king and was attached to Saivism. When she heard of the great saint Jnana Sambandhar and his doings and of his camping at Vedaranyam, the Pandyan queen, with the help of a minister who was also attached to Saivism, sent an invitation to the saint to visit Madura and convert the Pandya to Shaivism. The saint came accordingly. But when the queen saw he was a mere boy of about 10 or even less, she had serious misgivings whether he could be a match for all the big Jain leaders surrounding the king, and whether by inviting this child she had put him in jeopardy. When the saint noticed this, he sang these songs addressed to the queen and assuring her, "I am not in any way inferior to these Jains. The Lord is within me. Don't therefore be afraid." The songs which follow mention the names of Jain leaders, referring to them in contempt and stating, "I am not inferior to all these, as the Lord is within me." It is amusing to read those songs. Bhagavan added, "This was after the saint came to Madura. When the invitation reached Vedaranyam and Jnanasambandhar wanted to start for Madura, Appar Tirunavukkarasar, who was with Sambandhar, said, "Do not start today. The day is not auspicious for you. They, the Jains, are terrible and powerful persons." Thereupon Jnanasambandhar sang the Kolaru Padigam, beginning Veyur Tholi Pangan, in which again he says, "As the Lord is within me in my heart, no days, no planets can affect me adversely, and every day of the week is equally auspicious." In the afternoon, I brought the Thevaram for reference and picked out the above two songs, and Bhagavan read them, a few of them aloud. In the Madhura poem, Bhagavan referred to the last stanza and said, "When I explained the first stanza in the morning, I gave the meaning as 'because the Lord is within me,' though the words only mean 'because there is the Lord.' I was wondering whether I was justified in my interpretation. I find in the last stanza it is clearly mentioned by the saint himself that what he meant was 'because the Lord is within me.' Besides, the same is clear from the whole of the Kolaru Padigam. Look at the last verse in the Madhura Decad. With what authority he sings, "No harm can approach those who sing these songs of the king of Shiali and the master of Tamil." Similarly, in the last song of Kolaru Padigam, he says, "By my order, those who read these shall be saved." This evening also, Samaveda was recited. 22/3/1946 afternoon. Last night, Mr. Bose, his mother, Lady C.V. Raman, and Swami Sambuddhananda of the Ramakrishna Mission, Bombay, arrived here. The Swami quoted a verse from Bhagavad Gita which says that 1 in 1,000 succeeds and knows really the tattva or entity. For some time, Bhagavan kept quiet. When the Swami wanted an answer, some of us could not help remarking, "What is your question? What answer do you expect?" Dr. Masalawala even pointedly asked, "What is the motive behind this question?" Thereupon, the Swami said, "I think our Bhagavan has attained self-realization. Such beings are walking Upanishads. So I want to hear from his own lips his experience of self-realization. Why are you all butting in and distracting us from the point and purpose of my question?" After all this, Bhagavan said, "You say you think I have attained self-realization. I must know what you mean by self-realization. What idea do you have in your mind about it?" The Swami was not pleased with this counter question, but added after some time, "I mean the Atman merging in the Paramatman." Bhagavan then said, "We do not know about the Paramatman or the universal soul, etc. We know we exist. Nobody doubts he exists, though he may doubt the existence of God. So, if one finds out about the truth or source of oneself, that is all that is required." The Swami thereupon said, "Bhagavan therefore says, 'Know thyself.'" Bhagavan said, "Even that is not correct. For if we talk of knowing the self, there must be two selves. One a knowing self, another the self which is known, and the process of knowing. The state we call realization is simply being oneself, not knowing anything or becoming anything. If one has realized he is that which alone is and which alone has always been, he cannot describe that state. He can only be that. Of course, we loosely talk of self-realization, for want of a better term. How to realize or make real that which alone is real. What we are all doing is we realized or regard as real that which is unreal. This habit of ours has to be given up. All sadhana under all systems of thought is meant only for this end. When we give up regarding the unreal as real, then the reality alone will remain and we will be that. The Swami replied, "This exposition is all right with reference to Advaita. But there are other schools which do not insist on the disappearance of Triputi, the three factors of knowledge, as the condition for self-realization. There are schools which believe in the existence of two and even three eternal entities. There is the Bhakta, for instance, that he may do bhakti, there must be a God." Bhagavan replied, "Whoever objects to one having a God to worship, so long as he requires such a separate God, through bhakti he develops himself and comes to feel that God alone exists and that he, the Bhakta, does not count. He comes to a stage when he says, 'Not I, but thou, not my will, but thy will.' When that stage is reached, which is called complete surrender in the Bhakti Marga, one finds effacement of ego is attainment of self. We need not quarrel whether there are two entities or more or only one. Even according to Dvaitis and according to the Bhakti Marga, complete surrender is prescribed. Do that first and then see for yourself whether the one self alone exists or whether there are two or more entities." Bhagavan further added, "Whatever may be said to suit the different capacities of different men, the truth is the state of self-realization must be beyond Triputis. The self is not something of which jnana or ajnana can be predicated. It is beyond ajnana and jnana. The self is the self, that is all there can be said of it." The Swami then asked whether a jnani could remain with his body after attaining self-realization. He said, "It is said that the impact of self-realization is so forceful that the weak physical body cannot bear it for more than 21 days at the longest." Bhagavan said, "What is your idea of a jnani? Is he the body or something different? If he is something apart from the body, how could he be affected by the body? The books talk of different kinds of mukti, videha mukti without body and jivan mukti with body. There may be different stages in the sadhana, but in realization there are no degrees." The Swami then asked, "What is the best means for self-realization?" Bhagavan, "I exist" is the only permanent, self-evident experience of everyone. Nothing else is so self-evident, pratyaksha, as I am. What people call self-evident, namely the experience they get through the senses, is far from self-evident. The self alone is that. Pratyaksha is another name for the self. So, to do self-analysis and be I am is the only thing to do. I am is reality. I am this or that is unreal. I am is truth, another name for self. I am God is not true. The Swami thereupon said, The Upanishads themselves have said, I am Brahman. Bhagavan replied, that is not how the text is to be understood. It simply means Brahman exists as I and not I am Brahman. It is not to be supposed that a man is advised to contemplate I am Brahman, I am Brahman. Does a man keep on thinking I am a man, I am a man? He is that, and except when a doubt arises as to whether he is an animal or a tree, there is no need for him to assert I am a man. Similarly, the self is self. Brahman exists as I am in everything and every being. The Swami remarked, the bhakta requires a god to whom he can do bhakti. Is he to be taught that there is only the self, not a worshipper and the worshipped? Bhagavan: of course, God is required for sadhana, but the end of the sadhana, even in Bhakti Marga, is attained only after complete surrender. What does it mean except that effacement of ego results in self remaining as it always has been? Whatever path one may choose, the I is inescapable. The I that does the Nishkama Karma, the I that pines for joining the Lord from whom it feels it has been separated, the I that feels it has slipped from its real nature, and so on. The source of this I must be found out. Then all questions will be solved. Whereas all paths are approved in the Bhagavad Gita, it says that the Jnani is the best Karma Yogi, the best devotee or Bhakta, the highest Yogi, and so on. The Swami still persisted. It is all right to say self-analysis is the best thing to do, but in practice we find a God is necessary for most people. Bhagavan: God is of course necessary for most people. They can go on with one till they find out they and God are not different. The Swami continued, in actual practice, sadhakas, even sincere ones, sometimes become dejected and lose faith in God. How to restore their faith? What should we do for them? Bhagavan: if one cannot believe in God, it does not matter. I suppose he believes in himself, his own existence. Let him find out the source from which he came. Swami: such a man will only say the source from which he comes are his parents. Bhagavan: he cannot be such an ignoramus, as you started by saying he was a sadhaka in this line already. 23:3:46 Afternoon. Bhagavan was perusing Tirukkovalur Puranam and telling the story of Pari the philanthropist and about Avvai having got his daughters married to a king. Bhagavan was saying that in this book Pari is traced to Ceylon, whereas in other books a Pari is mentioned as having lived in these parts and having eclipsed by his liberality the three kings Chera, Chola and Pandya. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Sarvam Sri Ramanarpanamastu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.